So, hello and good morning. Well, good morning here in London anyway, to all of you joining us for our CiC monthly webinar for May 2022. Quite a broad topic today, looking at mental health awareness. It's been Mental Health Awareness Week here in the UK recently, and that always starts to make me think about what really does mental health awareness mean? We're going to look at that from lots of different perspectives today. Um, so my name's Harry Key. I'm the head of the Global Specialist Services team here at CiC. What that means is that I'm a psychotherapist. I work mainly with groups and organizations, but also with individuals. And at CiC, we have a varied number of offerings to our customers. We have our regular EAP business that many of you will be subscribers of, but we also do lots of specialist stuff around training, particularly in trauma. We run quite a few global support programs, largely for journalists working in hostile environments across the globe. We've been working with a lot of them with the war in Ukraine, supporting them through some really difficult stories they're covering. Um, and I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce a little bit of that global aspect to these sessions, because I do know that we get not only people dialing in from all sorts of places around the world, but people dialing in who have experience of cultures, of countries, of different organizational approaches to mental health. And that's what really I started to think about when I was thinking about mental health awareness. It's different for me. I'm a mental health professional. My mental health awareness should be pretty high. It would be strange if it wasn't. But in some organizations, in some countries, in some cultures, we have a really different way of talking, thinking about, and engaging with mental health. So, my first question, and to get us all kind of started here, and I want to hear your responses in the chat, so please do now, is what does the term mental health mean to you? And if you've got a particular response that you think is related to your culture, either organizationally or the country or background you're from, I'd love to hear that as well in the chat. I'm always quite clear when I'm working cross-culturally that I can only come from and exist in one culture where I'm from, and I don't have much choice in that. So I rely on my audiences, I rely on the people that I speak to around the world to be able to inform me about these cultural differences. So I'd be really interested to hear, let me know in the chat, what does that phrase mental health mean to you? Any kind of thoughts, sentences or phrases that come up when we talk about this would be really interesting. I have done my job. I will share my definition of mental health after this. So Ian's got us started. Thanks, Ian. The health of mind, thoughts, and feelings. Yes, we're already started to combine quite a lot of stuff there, right? Our mind, something neurological, an organ of our body, but then also our thoughts, the way that we process things in our mind, and then our feelings, our emotions, which for some people, our emotions are securely located up here in our head. For others, our emotions are more bodily, they're more physical, they're more involved in the world around us. That can be quite different already, thinking of the different cultures. Thank you. Monica simply put well-being. Yeah, I think that that's a really good way of kind of uh, distilling it down to what it means is how well are you? Because your mental health and your physical health are really linked together. Yeah. Rebecca says here, mental health to me is the well-being of you physically and your mind and how they work together. Yeah, perfectly. He says psychological and emotional well-being. And yeah, that psychological well-being, that comes back to that, that real neurological pathway kind of thought process as to how well our brain is actually doing. Louisa said emotional well-being as well. Chantel said a good one here, reviewing internal issues within myself. Yeah, taking that opportunity to have some self-awareness and be kind of self-seeking. Yeah. Kelly says emotionally good or unbalanced. Yeah. So I often like to think of mental health in kind of terms of balance. How am I doing today? I might be doing pretty well today. I might score myself, 8 or 9 out of 10 for my mental health. Tomorrow, that might be completely different. That balance can change week to week, day to day, hour to hour sometimes. Not going to have a chance to read all of these things, but I'll pick out some good ones here. Katie says, mental health can be good or bad, just like our physical health. Yeah. Someone's well-being, Nicola says here. Jazz says something that may not be visible to others. That's a really important thing to know, especially again once we're thinking about cross-cultural working and working with people from all over the world. If it's something not visible, then the only way that we can describe it is in language. And each country, each community, each region will have their own language and ways of describing their body, their brain, their selves, their desires, their needs, and things like that. Yeah. Lisa says how our individual mind works. Sarah's bringing up again the parallels to physical health. Um, Naomi says here the varying ability to cope with daily stressors and have a certain stability and resilience. I love that breakdown. Yeah. And it is that varying ability, as we were just talking about with balance there. Someone said here privately self-awareness, knowing what we're feeling and what we need. Yeah, most importantly, how to meet our needs. I talk about that a lot if you've been to these sessions before, about trying to find, for my mental health, trying to find a clear, comfortable space where I can focus on and start to meet my needs. Yeah. Wow, some really good examples coming in here. Thank you. Gaminda says emotional, psychological, and social well-being. That's going to be on my next slide, that kind of breakdown. Yeah, that's how I would define mental health. Sean saying here it's a continuum. It can change, symptoms come and go. Yeah. And Gominda saying again, it affects us day to day, how we feel and how things affect us and how we handle stress. That's exactly how I would define it. So it's a lot of what you've said here. It includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. I might add into there actually, and the balance between these things, because my mental health affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. It also helps determine how we handle stress and relate to other people. If my mental health is poor, stress is going to affect me more. I'm less resilient to the stresses and strains of the world around me. I'm less able to relate to other people around me. So there's a big aspect of a lot of mental health difficulties or conditions where I'm starting to turn that lens on myself. I'm starting to focus on my mental well-being and how I'm not doing so well. And sometimes that inward facing look can be really difficult for us, particularly when we're struggling. I don't know about all of you, but when I'm struggling, I'm not very kind to myself. I'm not giving myself that rest and relaxation I need. I'm probably pushing myself, trying to get better and get back on top. And then this last one is really important. My physical health and my mental health are linked. My mental health is tied irrevocably to my general well-being. Yeah, I have a cold sore at the moment. You can't see that very easily on this little screen, hopefully, but it annoys me. It frustrates me. It's changing the way I eat and I drink. It's changing the way I think about myself. It changes how I look and how I'm concerned about how I look to others and how I appear to them in the world. It's a real tiny little thing on my lip that can affect my mental health, for a short term, hopefully, but it's still an effect on my mental health. Good. I also wanted just to start looking at what some of the misconceptions we see around mental health. I've put a list of a few up here, but as I say, I really, really rely on your comments and your points of view here. So I'd love to hear in the chat, do any of you have you come across any of these kind of misconceptions around mental health? Particularly again, if you think they're specific to your culture or your background. You know, here in the UK, we've got this kind of legacy of the kind of old Victorian era of this British stiff upper lip, not talking about your issues, and also, this kind of idea that if you suffer from poor mental health, you're weak. There's a weakness or a problem with you there. You're not being as you should. You're not being your best person. You know, even all the way through the kind of the World War, Second World War, we had this phrase that made a comeback a few years ago in the UK: keep calm and carry on. Well, I can't keep calm if I'm anxious. A poster telling me to keep calm isn't going to help me change my mental health. What will help me change my mental health is getting support for that anxiety. So let's see what people have got to say in the chat here. Thank you again for engaging with these. I'll come to mine in a little bit. Like I say, yours are far more important. So Lorraine says here, it has a stigma. Yeah, so a stigma is when there's a preconceived notion. There's this usually a negative preconceived notion that mental health means something. Yeah. Fiona says here, my hard-nosed mother would just say, pull yourself together, not helpful. Yeah, that's that kind of British stiff upper lip feeling I'm getting from there as well. Yeah, Jazz say, I agree, it does have a stigma. David says, people thinking that you're attention seeking. Yeah, this is a really good one. Thanks for sharing that, David. That that comes across quite often in my conversations with individuals. I'll start giving them some psychotherapeutic support, and then quite soon people will say, "Well, I don't really need this. There's much more important people in the world that you could be helping. I feel like I'm just asking for attention or being self-serving here." Yeah, and we can feel that from other people. And I think that that's really linked into how invisible mental health is, right? Is is basically I fear that people are going to think I'm attention seeking because there's nothing I can show them to prove my mental health is poor. So because I fear other people are going to think that, I start projecting that idea out into the world. So I feel that I'm getting a lot of this. And then some people do. Some people will outright say mental health problems aren't a real thing, they're just attention seeking. And that can be so hurtful. Imagine if I was, I don't know, screaming in the middle of the road after being hit by a car, and someone said to me, "Nah, he's just attention seeking. Don't call him an ambulance. He doesn't need any support. He doesn't need any help for what's happened to him." It can be really difficult. Yeah. Haiti says here the misconception often make those with low mental health feel worse in my experience. Yes. And the theme of Mental Health Awareness Week this year was loneliness. When I don't feel like people understand or care for my mental health, it's going to drive me further within myself. It's going to put me more in that position of loneliness. And the lonelier I get, the less able I am to seek that support. Yeah. Rebecca says, yes, there is also that you can't have mental health problems. Your life is good. Yes. Yeah. You earn a lot of money, so your mental health can't be poor. You've got a healthy family, so your mental health can't be poor. You live in a first world country, so your mental health can't be poor. Lots of things that are used to dismiss our mental health because of the position we're in at the moment. And this is often something that's used in cultures to kind of put people down and keep them down. We see a lot of that happening these days. I certainly recognize a lot of it as well. Yeah. Wendy says here people are still told to pull themselves together. Yeah, Lorraine agreeing here. As it's hidden, people don't see it. So we do form naturally misconceptions about things that we can't see. Gemma says here, you can choose not to have one. Yeah, that's my bottom misconception here. So true in much of the responses to disclosure. Yes, this idea that, you know, if you're mentally unwell, then it's your job to just pull yourself out of it. You can do a few things and you'll be fine. And again, you wouldn't say that to someone who is suffering from a severe physical health condition. Someone came to you and told you they just had a diagnosis of something really terrible like cancer. You wouldn't say, well, you know what you need to do? You need to pull yourself together and get yourself out of this. It's not that simple, and it's way less simple actually with mental health. There can be so many things combining to create those issues. Yeah. Chantel says suffers are strong. Asking for help is brave, and I believe all have an element. Yeah, it's a really good way of putting it. I like that kind of fighting the misconceptions by showing the strength. Because if someone is still speaking up about their mental health, despite all of these misconceptions being in our culture, in our community, imagine the amount of strength it takes strength it takes to come and do that. Yeah. Becky says here, I hear that everyone seems to have a mental health condition these days, diminishing the seriousness. Yes, really good one. Yeah, saying, oh, lots of people are talking about this. Yeah. Alistair saying, anyone who has never experienced a mental health issue has no point of reference. They simply do not understand. And that comes through in every comment, even those who are trying to help. I agree. And Alistair, I'd go a little bit further to say, I don't think it's very easy to get to a certain stage in life and to have not experienced some sort of mental health issue. Now, often those people that then find that really uncomfortable because of those stigmas then put those stigmas onto others that suffer mental health conditions because it was uncomfortable for them and they felt that kind of weakness or that difficulty or whatever. Yeah. Gosh, lots of really good stuff. Yeah, still a stiff upper lip. In some ways, Chantel says here, you don't want to burden or scare others by sharing. Yeah, these misconceptions kind of come ahead of any support. Lisa here agreeing with Rebecca, we get told your life is good, so you can't have mental health problems. Lots of stigma attached to it. Yeah. Sean saying, agreeing with Matty about funding. I think it's often hard for people to seek support they need at earlier stages. And this is something that I really hope these kind of webinars produce, is just an easier conversation around mental health. I agree with both of you there that this this idea that Mental health support has to come when you're at a real crisis point. Because a lot of these misconceptions are telling us to not make a fuss, right? They're telling us not make an issue out of something little. And I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying make an issue out of something little. That first time you feel a little twinge in your mental health, something going a little bit wrong, that's the time to speak to someone. That's the time to get to some support. Because if we wait till it's really bad, it's going to need much more severe care. I'll give you an example. Let's say, for instance, this isn't true, but maybe I like running for exercise. If I go for a run today and I sprain my ankle, what do I do tomorrow? I give myself a break. I give it a rest. I give my ankle time to heal and repair naturally. Well, if I don't do that with my ankle, if I do keep running every single day, that injury is just going to get worse and worse and worse until I need surgery or something really serious. It's the same with our mental health. If I can have a stressful day and I can have a strong support circle that can help me debrief from that stressful day, that can help me feel like, I'm not as affected by it as I need to be, all of these sorts of beautiful things we can do, then tomorrow's going to be fine, much, much easier for me. I can take it a bit easy on myself. Yeah, I can slow things down a little bit. And I can heal and repair that broken mind, that twisted ankle in my brain, instead of pushing myself and waiting till I'm burnt out, severely anxious, in a real low state of depression. And then at that point, yeah, I've got some really difficult things I need to do. Yeah, Donna, I've heard that phrase so many times. What do you have to be depressed about? How long have you got? How long's a piece of string? I've got plenty of reasons I could be depressed. I'm pleased to say at the moment I don't feel that depression, but I know as a human being, it'll be natural for me to go into a depressive state at some point this year. Be hard to avoid it. My mood has to go up and down. If my mood doesn't go down, how would I feel when my mood goes up? I would have no reference whatsoever. Sarah says being told, oh, that's very common can also be dismissive because many experience it doesn't mean it shouldn't be acknowledged or addressed. Yeah, and that's the fine line in mental health support around normalizing. So letting someone know that the feelings that they have are normal and understandable. There isn't something broken about them. They're having an understandable reaction. It's the balance between that and being dismissive, as you say. Anna says, I think it's a balance between acknowledging difficulties and not pathologizing what is the range of human experience. Yeah. I've chosen a really inopportune time to start losing my voice, so I'm going to start talking a little quieter. Lisa says here, it's easier to take time off sick with a physical injury than to tell managers you have depression. Yeah. So my misconceptions here follow a lot of what you've said here. Mental health problems are uncommon, massive misconception. But actually the other side of that is now people thinking mental health problems are so common, everyone suffers with them, you're not important. Mental health problems mean you can't work or that they're a sign of weakness. A lot of people saying, I don't need professional help, I have friends. Strong social relationships are really important, but they can't do it all. Some of you have said here, I can be suffering with my mental health and I don't want to talk to my friends and family about it because I don't want to burden them with this. And then, yeah, mental health problems are permanent and you can choose to have a mental health problem. Gominda says here, if someone doesn't have anyone to talk to about their problems and are lonely, what should they do? Well, this is it. This is the idea that I come to quite a lot, Gominda, with this, is I feel like I don't have anyone to talk to. You're talking to me right now. It's a different form of talking. You're writing a chat message in a room full of over 100 people. It's a bit strange, it's a bit different, but you're sharing and you're communicating. So it's about finding the safe and comfortable space for you to talk. That's all. And that's why companies like CiC exist. That's why employee assistance programs exist, is to create that access to a trusted listening ear where you can go to in confidence and start that conversation. So Gominda, my biggest recommendation for you would be to get in touch with your employee assistance program. Start that conversation. Because once we get practiced in talking to strangers about this stuff, then we start to understand how we can talk to our loved ones, our family and friends about it. Nomi saying here, I work in the Ukraine refugee response, and there is a tendency to group Ukrainians as all traumatized. Even staff members are exposed to mental health checks before getting accepted into jobs, which is highly controversial. Well, controversial, but I think also important for the risk and safety. I think you're right. I think it is unfair to to judge a whole community of people based on what they're going through and say they are all traumatized. I think you're absolutely right. But if you're going to be working with the potentially traumatized, I think it's important that your mental health is considered as well. And that's why those mental health checks for people taking on those roles, I think, are pretty important. We do quite similar here at CiC. As I said at the beginning, we work with a lot of journalists covering the story, and we'll offer them confidential check-in sessions. It doesn't have to be a whole, course of therapy or counselling, just a one-to-one check-in with a counsellor just to say how you're getting on at the moment. I think that can be really useful, especially if you're then considering carrying on in a really difficult role, taking on more traumatized conversations. Everyone, I'm really enjoying this conversation, so please keep these points of view coming. I'm going to talk through a couple more slides because, why do we need mental health awareness? Let me know in the chat why you think mental health awareness is important. Obviously, we've looked at stigma, we've looked at misconceptions. I think the better mental health awareness we have, the more of these open conversations we have about mental health, the more we lessen that stigma. And if we lessen that stigma, then people can get that support earlier. They're not holding on until they've got a real serious issue. Mental health issues are affecting more and more of us each year. Stress, anxiety, and depression are estimated to be the leading cause of working days lost, more than any other work-related illness. And then with mental health issues, along with the stigma we experience, presenteeism is a big concern, i.e. someone still coming to work when they're being affected by work and their mental health is getting worse and worse over time. And then this last point is, kind of a little bit in response to what you said there, Gominda, and I really appreciate your bravery in saying, if someone doesn't have anyone to talk about, what should they do? Is because we don't really have those same structures set up in a lot of places. As individuals, a number of us will know what to do with our physical body to get fit and healthy, but we might not have those same resources for that mental health improvement that we might need. Yeah. So let's see what people have got to say in the chat here. Chantal says, this is the perfect way to share as you feel like you're safe. Yeah. Nayland says here, I've suffered with mental health for over 30 years. And I think your message got cut off there. I'd love to hear the rest of it though, Nayland. Ian says here, it's important as many as suffering as in silence. Yeah, the more we can raise that awareness, Ian, I agree wholeheartedly, the less people will have to sit. So many times I have a first conversation with someone who needs support, and they say, gosh, I've been needing this conversation for such a long time, but I felt like I wasn't allowed to. I felt like I wasn't important enough. I felt like my situation wasn't severe enough to get that support. So yeah, I think it's really important. Rebecca says here, people fear what they don't know. If everyone knows about mental health awareness, they hopefully will not fear the unknown. It's a long shot, but I reckon we can all make this happen one day. I agree with you, Rebecca. That's kind of one of my aims with these open sessions, as I say. Gemma says, presenteeism is something I've not heard of before, but describes so many people's experiences. Yeah, presenteeism is that exact thing of someone, running on a sprained ankle. My mental health is being affected by work. I need to take some time. It might even just be half a day. But again, if I can take power, if I can be in that position of control and say, hey, it's been a tough week, I need half a day off, I'm going to get much more support from myself, from my mental health, than if I feel like I have to hide and still keep performing and still keep going, even when I know I'm failing and I'm not doing so well. It's going to be so much more positive. Human beings, we can achieve so much when we feel like we have power and control over our own needs. Nathan saying here, so people gain knowledge and understanding and it's not a taboo. Yes. Katie says, I think a big problem is that help for mental health, i.e. going to a counsellor, is extremely expensive. Yeah. And look, sorry, the voice is really starting to go. That's one thing that I think is really important about employee assistance programs. I know I'm going to have a bias because I work for one, but this is the best, most available and most affordable mental health care many people in the UK can get is through their employer with an employee assistance program. The stuff that the NHS does, the mental health support, is absolutely fantastic. You have people working tirelessly to support their community's mental health, but they're overloaded. I don't know the last time you went to try and get NHS mental health services, but in many places in the UK, the waiting list is 6, 12, 18 months sometimes. But with an employee assistance program, if your employer has one, you can get that support pretty much immediately. We can usually have someone in a first session within a week. And yeah, it might not be linked in with your GP and all those other services, but it's free and it's confidential and it's highly skilled mental health support. Sean says, as a manager and I work with clients, it's good to have an awareness of different kinds of mental health issues. Yeah, I think as a manager, it's vital. It's important to be able to have open conversations and hold space for the people I work with, giving people some time or slack if they're struggling. I love that. Lorraine says all doctors want to offer is pills and not therapy. Lisa said GPs need more training, the NHS funding to cover this. Yeah, the NHS has been grossly overfunded over the past few years, at the same time as being attacked for not being very good. That's why I'm very careful when I say I don't think that any of the mental health support given from the NHS is poor or anything like that. It's just overloaded. It's underfunded. If you had double the amount of therapists working for the NHS, it would be able to provide double the amount of care. But of course, yeah, if the funding isn't there, we're in a tricky time financially as a country. Lisa said my GP said I was just down and to get a hobby. Yeah, wow. So perhaps some mental health awareness training for GPs in some places could be useful. Serge says, but if you take that day off work due to mental health, what do you do? Does it not make it worse as then you are not distracted? It depends. I mean, so sometimes I've taken days off for my mental health and I've got nothing done, nothing productive, but resting. Um, it's about how we're allowed to take that day off for mental health as well. If I feel I have to kind of come up with a really good excuse for my manager and really kind of beg for this day off, then yeah, it's going to be difficult. But if I'm working in an organization that allows me to take mental health days and completely switch off, not be expected to catch up on everything and things like that, then yeah, I'm going to be less able to be feeling like I'm forced and guilty. Fiona says here in the chat, some people find it incredibly difficult to talk about anything like this. Can you all hear me? I think I disappeared for a second. Some people find it incredibly difficult to talk about anything like this. I am an oversharer, but my housemate who's had huge issues with his mental health cannot talk about anything personal. He had a complete breakdown and now is doing counseling, which is great and really helping him. Not that he talks about it. One nice little story, yeah, and it shows kind of lots of the different ways in which we can engage with mental health and mental health support as well. Yeah. Someone says here privately, without going into details, I was told by the CiC that I had too many issues to cover in the free 6 sessions, so they couldn't help me. Yeah, and that's a really tough, and that's why I come back to that comment I made earlier on, is mental health awareness is important because hopefully it gets people to seek support early on. The mental health support that the EAPs provide has to be limited. It has to be limited, which is a real shame. We do have some organizations that work with us on an unlimited basis and allow us to take on more severe cases. But yeah, in those cases, it's really, really tough for us because as clinicians, we know that it's counseling and psychotherapy that people need, but they need more than the 6 sessions that their organization offers. But look, if the stigma goes and the culture changes, maybe one day people can go to their organization and say, openly and honestly, I went to the employee assistance program. They only offer 6 sessions as standard, but they said I need more. Can you authorize payment for more sessions for me or something like that? Which is something that I think organizations should consider doing, particularly if they're in a position of causing stress to their members of their team. Sarah says here, I read a saying that goes, look after your wellness or you'll have to make time for your illness. So true. I love that. I think that's really cool. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah. And that really kind of links mental and physical health there as well, generally with that wellness. Yeah. Matty's came up with a really good response here. Resting is being productive. Yeah. I was thinking the other day about how much I used to really enjoy doing nothing as a kid, and I was wondering if I was missing it because of that childishness, or if I was missing it because I could just do nothing. Um, I started to think, what was the adult equivalent? And I don't think as an adult I've had time where I can just allow myself to do nothing so easily. Yeah. Shoba says we have been gifted 3 well-being days per year, no questions asked, and can be taken any time. It's a beautiful thing for an employer to do, and such an easy thing to do. People are going to take 3 well-being days a year. If sometimes they might come up with some physical health excuse that allows them to get it, or in most cases, we will just have unproductive days at work, which doesn't benefit anyone. It doesn't benefit the organization because I'm not being productive as I should, but it doesn't benefit me because I'm not actually getting a rest. I'm just kind of getting through to the next day. I'd much rather everyone was given those 3 well-being days. That's brilliant. Yeah. Someone says here, privately currently requesting to use an EAP. The organization needs to know my name before they authorize the counseling sessions, and I want to keep this confidential. But if I don't give my name, then I won't be entitled to the counseling sessions. The company needs to know the name to make sure we're an employee of the organization. What to do here? This is a tough one. And employee assistance organizations like CiC, we rely on trust. We rely on a huge amount of trust. You're giving us some really personal information, and it's about us developing that trust that we're not going to go and share that with your organization. Now, we will at CiC, I don't know which EAP you're talking about, but at CiC, we will be able to support you without knowing your name, but we won't be able to refer you into a block of counseling sessions for the simple fact that we cannot manage risk if we don't have your name. If we don't know what your name is, we can't send you to one of our therapists, because it's not fair on our therapist to not know who's coming, and not know who they need to call and whose name they need to give if there's an emergency. Even something simple like someone having an anaphylactic shock on site at a therapy clinic, you need to be able to know some details about that person. It's really, really tough. But what you can do is speak to that organization and ask them to give you a guarantee of confidentiality, guarantee that they're not going to share that name with the organization, that the only reason they're using your name is to check if you're eligible for the services. Thanks for sharing that one. And look, we're coming up against even more stigmas, even more ideas around mental health. And it is so tough to speak up about these things. So thank you, everyone, for sharing. So what else did I want to say? Well, I wanted to talk about kind of mental health today and things we're starting to see. I'd love to hear in the chat, what do you think are the biggest mental health concerns that we should look at these days? What are the things that you think are affecting lots of people around you? This is going to be different for each of us. There's no one answer here. We're across lots of different communities and cultures here. But I'd love to hear what you think are the biggest mental health concerns kind of floating around today. Ildiko started us off with a really good one, work-life balance. And that's kind of what I'm talking about here at the top. This fatigue, emotional, mental, and physical. If I'm being pushed from all angles, I think particularly with the pandemic, with working from home, has for many people has been really positive, but it also brings that kind of crashing together of work life and home life. So fatigue, emotional, mental, and physical, just that general tiredness is really tough. I also think uncertainty for the future, fear and anxiety. We're living in a world that was just completely ripped apart by a pandemic, completely changed. Over the past 2 years, I've done more things for the first time than I did in the first 15 years of my life, I imagine. Loads and loads of strange new things happening, which can be exciting and interesting, but can also be terrifying and anxiety provoking. We've also got, well, particularly here in Europe, we've got a war going on. That creates uncertainty, fear, and anxiety. We don't know what's coming next for us. And then our relationships at work have been changed by all these different locations we're working from. We've had more pressure on our relationships at home. We're forgetting, I think, with a lot of this remote working, because we're only operating on computers, that our body is involved. My body is involved in everything I'm doing today for my job, but it gets forgotten so easily because I just plonk my bottom on a chair and I don't think about it anymore. There's also the potential for psychological trauma going on. We are in a fast-paced, difficult world. A difficult world where we are connected constantly by the media and social media to all of the terrible things happening in the world. And I think that potential for psychological trauma is huge. I care for love and my heart bleeds for everyone struggling across the world, but my awareness of all of it is so good at the moment that I can also be traumatized by that. And then loneliness, the theme of Mental Health Awareness Week this year. It is important that we have a strong support circle around us. But I mean, just by a show of hands, give me a yes in the chat. Are you someone that over the past 2 years has become a bit removed from their support circle? Are you someone who is now, Chantal, yeah, Lee, okay, lots of you raising your hands here. Are you someone that's moved to a different part of the world or a different part of the country for your job or for, with your family or something, and feeling that kind of, separation? Lots of you there with your hands raised. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with me. I appreciate your honesty here, all of you. So let's see. Work-life balance, we start off with Ideco. Yeah. What else do we have? Carly says anxiety seems to have increased considerably since COVID. Yeah. Look, we're animals. The world has become more dangerous. We are more anxious. It's simple. It should be a biological understanding, not a mental health issue that we call that. Anxiety should be, I think, something that's measured in a community. I think it should be a figure that can be discussed by government and ruling parties and things like that to say, look, the economy's going up, but the anxiety levels are going up as well. Or, looking at these kind of different things can be really useful, I think. Yeah, Tasha just said the sheer pace of life, that always on feeling, feeling like I'm expected to respond immediately to things. Oh, really good one. Yeah. Cost of living crisis, Fiona says here. Yeah, I think that's going to be a huge impact on mental health over the next few years here in the UK. Um, Also, I'm doing a lot of work with clients in some countries at the moment whose currencies are just going down, down, and down. Some of our colleagues in Turkey, um, even some of our, colleagues in a difficult position in Russia, having their financial situation completely changed over the course of a few months is really going to change the stress levels and anxiety that we feel. Strained family relationships, Katie says. Sarah says social media creating unrealistic expectations and competition. It's that competition aspect that concerns me quite a lot about social media as well, Sarah. This idea that we're all supposed to be excellent and competing with each other to be the best the whole time. Yeah. Affecting all of the family, working from home, lack of education, health and anxiety, loneliness and individualism. Yeah. Donna saying triggers, media, the news, again, unrealistic projections on social media. Fiona saying we're in a precarious world with challenges everywhere: pandemic, war, cost of living, job insecurity. Yeah, and look, a lot of that's been going on for our whole lives, but we get a kind of different attention to it and a different awareness of it, I think, as well. Yeah, Nomi says it here: being digitally so well connected that we feel we constantly have to be available and checking emails, and that just adds to that fatigue, that burnout. Yeah, Lisa here saying grief. Donna says, I often say, stop the world, I want to get off. Yeah. Well, look, it can hit that point quite easy for us sometimes, right? But look, we can get off, by the way. We can take a break. I know that there is a lot of really tough and terrible stuff going on in the world, but it's also okay if you want to take a rest from being aware of that and to not have an opinion on these things. I think a lot of, like, particularly social media, the social aspect of it, encourages us to have an opinion on everything and to be on one side or the other of every argument going on out there. How many of you have been asked to consider whether you're on the side of Johnny Depp or Amber Heard in a defamation trial going on in a country that you're not even part of? It's interesting, but do I really need to spend mental energy and power on making all of these decisions and being involved in all of these different ideas? Lots of people saying yes here. Carly saying not really, but it's easy to grow more remote if anxious about contracting COVID or home working. Yeah, my support circle is everything to me, Fiona says. Don't know how I'd cope without it. I'm with you 100% there, Fiona. Liz saying, yeah, recently moved with small children and no support network. Donna says, I've become more antisocial, not a good look. Donna, I'm going to pick your comment out. I'm going to pick on you a little bit. It's a fine look. It's fine to become a bit more antisocial in a time where we've been told social interaction is dangerous to our health. You're doing nothing wrong. We're withdrawing naturally as animals. We're staying away from the danger. It's what we do next that's important. It's ensuring that even if I'm being antisocial or less social than usual, am I still meeting my needs? Am I still able to care for myself? That's the important thing. And just not challenging ourselves too much. Not expecting to go from what we've been through to the last couple of years to getting on planes and going to other countries again, taking it slowly, getting back out into the world bit by bit, and not punishing ourselves when things don't go to plan. Because we're not in charge of those plans at the moment. Chantel says being in crowds is difficult. Yeah. David says since the pandemic, I'm more introvert, but I find I need people less. I'm happier alone than I was. Yeah, that's kind of just what I was talking about, David. Exactly. So just because we're less social than we used to be, don't immediately blame ourselves and bring that kind of guilt in. Lowly saying here, I'm organising a Jubilee street party and was amazed at home how many people on my road have isolation, mental health issues, not talking to anyone. I feel sad that people go through that in silence. I feel sad about it too, and I think it's beautiful that you're bringing them together with a street party. Yeah. Yeah, Hill says the same thing. Well done, Lonnie, for organising the party. Yeah, great. Guys, thank you so much for these conversations. Hopefully you find them as interesting as I do. I wanted to just briefly talk through kind of some of the effects of poor mental health. Um, I'd love to hear in the chat, what do you think are the effects of on your workplace of someone suffering with stress or poor mental health? How might you become aware of those mental health issues, and what support can you offer? Because we might have all sorts of effects of difficult mental health conditions, burnout, someone just having a lack of energy. Alison said here, lack of motivation. Yeah. Matty says here they get judged. Yeah. Heidi saying here, burnout. Burnout's one of our biggest concerns at the moment as an employee assistance program. Again, like I said to that person who said earlier that, they called up, and if someone calls us up and they're close to burnout, 6 sessions of counseling isn't really going to touch the sides. We need to speak to people when they're stressed, not when they're at that kind of right last end of it. But unless we change the stigma around mental health and increase the awareness, we might not get there. Burnout. Kelly says it's hard to concentrate, which leads to mistakes, which makes you feel worse. Yeah, so many of these responses, I think what's included in here is our look at ourself, the way it changes our view of ourself and our own well-being. I know when I'm struggling, but do I also need to be harsh on myself for that? Do I also need to beat myself down when I'm not doing so well? Look, I'm all for positivity and positive psychology, but I know it's difficult because when I'm feeling at my worst, I am my worst enemy. I'm not being kind to myself. I'm blaming myself for every single mistake. I'm imagining all of these people out there in the world looking at me negatively and hating me and thinking that I'm weak and terrible and all of that. So it drives me even further. So my biggest idea to all of you is, if we can start conversations with our colleagues, our friends, and our family members about mental health before mental health has become a problem for either of us. Just talking about it like it's a TV show. How many of you, like I say, have had conversations this year about things that you're not really that interested in? TV shows, I'll go back to that, celebrity trial in another country, all sorts of things. Can we have also just general conversations about mental health? Can we just make it more of a day-to-day topic that we talk about? Because the more we do that, the earlier people can stick their hand up and say, oh, that mental health thing we've been talking about recently. Yeah, I think I felt that yesterday when I got to the end of the day and my brain was really fuzzy. Yeah, that's your mental health. Not your brain being fuzzy for 6 months and then you crashing out and not being able to get out of bed. That's mental health, physical health, social health, emotional health. That needs a lot of support. Just need to try and talk about this a little bit earlier. David saying here, snapping at someone. Yeah, Donna, making mistakes, not giving your all, inability to communicate. Chantel says a really good one, risk of injuries where I work, dealing with heavy equipment. Yeah, if my mental health is poor, if my mind's not on the thing, or I'm not focusing on the thing in front of me, it could be really dangerous. Someone says here privately, I don't know how to support my very stressed colleague. They're angry all the time and they keep getting more and more tasks. It's a really tough one when it's a colleague like that. But look, one thing that we can do, especially if we don't feel comfortable giving someone that individual approach, is just to start talking about stress and mental health more ourselves. Start talking about the support that's available. And then, yeah, Nayland said a good one here, being empathetic, being able to just give that person some space and time to to get that anger out their system as well. Yeah, Alison says here, when you're feeling bad, you need to be kinder to yourself. Yeah, it's hard though, right? Because when I'm feeling bad, I'm more likely to be bad to myself. Chantel says, I watch behaviors, offer to listen, a cup of tea and a biscuit, tell jokes and distract. Yeah. Someone says here privately, you talked about meeting our needs. I have quite a lonely life. I have a partner and family, but friends are far away. I know social interactions are critical for mental health. Unfortunately, it's very hard to make new friends at my age. I've moved to a new city a few years ago and it's not been easy to make friends. How can I provide something that is out of my control? Not having a group of friends to socialize makes it very hard. Unlike other people, I do need social interactions. Well, first of all, I'm going to put the link to the YouTube channel in there because back in February, I did a whole webinar on loneliness. And there might be some interesting topics and conversations in there for you. So go and have a look at the YouTube channel, take a look at that. The thing I'd say to you first and foremost is you're in a powerful position. You are noticing that one of your needs is not being met. You've done the very first really difficult bit. The next bit is just trying to meet those needs. The difficulty is when my mental health is poor, meeting those needs can feel really difficult, especially when it's around socializing. I don't want to put myself out there. I don't want to put myself out there because I don't want to get knocked back. I'm fearing and anxious about the negativity that I might get back in response. So start really small. Next time you're at the bus stop with someone or in a shop, start a little brief conversation with someone. That's how friendships start. You don't suddenly meet someone and fall into friendship with them. Friendships start with one person speaking to the other. So we just have to roll right back to that very basic and just starting those conversations. And it doesn't have to be a full-blown best friendship to meet that social need for all of us. It might just be a conversation every now and then. It's tough, but it's just a little bit of confidence that we need sometimes. And that's why I think confidence gets really knocked when we're imagining I have to do this big thing. I have to make a friendship group out of nothing. Well, I just need to talk to one person first. That's where it all starts. Joining groups as well can be really good. If anyone else has got any suggestions, pop them in the chat. Lorraine says self-care is important, taking time for ourselves, small goals. Yeah. Serge says currently my 10-year-old is having serious issues, stress, anxiety, depression, high fear. Any help specifically for children? Yeah, I think that I know I ragged on the NHS services, but the local services for child mental health tend to be really good. CAMS, child and adolescent mental health services. They're usually done by council, linked in with the schools, lots of support there. But from your perspective as a parent, I think just spending some time talking to them about your feelings allows them to build that vocabulary around their feelings. The better a child can communicate to their parent about how they're feeling, the more supported they feel, the less they'll feel affected. If they can come up with a buzzword for you for depression when they're feeling sad, and they can give you an idea of what they need from you when they're feeling sad, that can be really useful. Having those conversations is tough for kids. So making sure that they're playing a game, doing something with their hands like a puzzle while they're talking to you will help them feel a lot more safe and comfortable. And bring yourself to their level, sit down on the floor with them. I always find that really helps young people engage because there isn't so much of that hierarchy and that height difference. Hopefully that makes sense and that helps. Lots of good questions coming in. We're not going to have time to go to them all, but I'll come back to some of these when we get to the end. I actually just wanted to talk about that effect of loneliness, just because it links back in with this theme. I know I did a webinar on it recently, so those of you that were there will remember this slide. But yeah, find our webinar on loneliness on the YouTube channel, because poor mental health can create this sense of isolation and disconnection. The big difficulty is that it kind of pushes us further and further away from getting the support that we need. So we feel like we're lacking or missing social connections. And it differs from depression or anxiety because it's situational, but it can feel really similar. Loneliness can present just like depression and a bit like anxiety as well. And it can be really confusing for people. I can work in an office full of people. I can spend hours a week on the tube surrounded by people and still feel completely lonely. But it's a cycle. The longer we feel lonely, the more we tend to isolate ourselves and the worse our mental health gets. So the more we blame ourselves, the more negativity that comes in. It can make the whole world seem very unfriendly and scary. So if you're someone that's listening that is feeling lonely, really well done, first of all, for recognizing that in yourself. But can we treat it as a sign? Loneliness doesn't have to include guilt and shame and me piling negativity on myself. Loneliness can be a need of mine. Can I be grateful for that? Can I be grateful that my body gives me these feelings to tell me that one of my needs isn't being met? Just like a hunger. Do I get annoyed at myself when I'm hungry or when I'm thirsty? No, I just go and get some food or a drink. I know it's not so easy because it involves other people, but socializing can work in exactly the same way. Oh, lots of people saying that makes so much sense. Good. I'm glad it does. Chantel saying, I've already started educating my son, who is 10, about mental health, preparing him to embrace his feelings. Our family seems to suffer, so good to be prepared. Well, look, I think families are going to come across suffering. We're going to come across pain and difficulty in our lives, but Yeah, having those conversations early on is good. He's 10 years old. He's probably already aware of his own feelings and his emotions. It's just the language that we might not have to share it with others, and the confidence that we have that it's okay to share that kind of thing. I think starting those conversations with young people early is the only way we're going to get rid of generational stigma. It's the only way, in hopefully in 3 or 4 generations' time, that stiff upper lip for us in Britain will be gone. The last couple of things I wanted to talk to you about. I don't know if you guys are aware of a journalist from the BBC called Fergal Keane. He's covered war zones for a long, long time. And a couple of years ago, he came public about his diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. And he released this really useful documentary. Gosh, I think it was only last week or the week before, about his discovery of PTSD and his kind of recovery and the treatment he's getting. And I just really like this quote from the story that went along with it. He said, "I cannot stress enough that each individual mind calls for an individual approach." And I think that this is really important around mental health awareness. There isn't a one size fits all. You've asked so many beautiful questions here today, all of you, and made so many beautiful comments. I try and answer as many of these as possible, but some of the things that I suggest and some of the people that the other people here suggest might not work for you, and that's fine. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. If therapy doesn't work for you, if a certain type of therapy, I saw some conversation going on in the chat about CBT, if that doesn't work for you, that's nothing wrong with you. It just isn't the solution that fits for you. And he says here the best mental health professionals realize they are dealing with individuals and not cases to be slotted under predetermined labels. Yeah, Lisa says here, so many professionals put everyone in the same box. Of course, because it's easier to do. If I'm stressed in my job as a professional, as a mental health professional, of course, I'm just going to put people in boxes. It's much easier. Reduce them to data points, much simpler, right? But if I can actually slow down, if I've got the time and the space and the capacity, that's why I'm pleased to work with an organization like CiC that affords me that time. I am allowed to sit and think about cases, think about situations, and support people as individuals as I know that they are. So if we are to offer support to each other, what can we do? Um, Sometimes talking about mental health, I think these days, if you're someone that's here, you're likely someone that agrees that mental health should be a concern and mental health support should be there. I do get a few skeptics and a few cynics turning up. If you're there, let me know in the chat. If you completely disagree that mental health is important, let me know in the chat. I'd be interested to have that discussion. But really, it's about being supportive, but also assessing the person's needs with them, right? We just want to try and kind of get those needs a little bit more highlighted in their conversation. Nolan says here in the chat, coming from an ethnic background, my parents never understood as they never had to deal with it, as they did not know, as it was never talked about, and they suffered. Yeah, and there are some places in some parts of the world where that suffering is celebrated, it's cherished. People are championed for suffering through lots of stuff. Really interesting. Yeah. So while we're listening to someone talking about mental health, we need to kind of be assessing a little bit. And I really want it to be about listening, reflecting, identifying their emotions, and this key bit at the end, giving someone options, helping them to become aware of the options that they have for support. If you go into any conversation about mental health armed with a few places you can signpost someone to, that is beautiful from our perspective. Signposting is often minimized as this thing like, oh, you're just pointing someone in the next direction. Great. When I'm lost, when I'm driving through the countryside and I'm lost, a signpost is a difference between life and death. It's between finding a pub that's open and driving around country roads for hours. A signpost is beautiful. A signpost is someone telling me, hey, this is where you can go next. And that's exactly what we need in cases like this. So if you are someone that supports others with their mental health, just trying to go in with those options, not feeling like you have to be an expert and answer all their questions, but just say, hey, why don't we just get the computer out? Why don't we Google support for loneliness and see what we can find? See if any of these things suit you. Just be with someone while they find where to go next. And then finally, what can we do as individuals that hopefully kind of believe and agree that mental health is important? Share your goals, your plans, your thoughts, your ideas and emotions with others. Your emotions are a currency. They're an important currency. The more of it that we get out into the world, the more wealthy we all are, I think. Acknowledging your mental health, checking in and seeing on how you're treating yourself. setting good boundaries so that you can spend time and energy in the right places. You know, if I'm someone that's loving and supportive of others, I also need to make sure there's space for me to be loving and supportive of myself. And then finally, finding your own value. This can't be taken away by others. Not trying to get valued from other people, but finding that value in ourselves. And then switching off from the wants of others and finding that time, as I say, to tune into your needs. A couple of people agreeing with that. That's good. I feel that people are fed up with listening, says Lorraine. Yeah, I would find other people to talk to. If the people I'm talking to feel like they're fed up of listening, I'd find other people to talk to. And sometimes that might need to be a professional. You know, sometimes if I'm speaking to the same people over and over again, and usually people, maybe this is going to be a little bit challenging. I think people get fed up when they think that they're supposed to be listening for a reason other than listening. When they think you're asking for solutions, you're asking them to help, when really they're already helping just by listening. So sometimes letting them know that can be quite nice as well. Say, look, I need someone to talk to. I don't need you to try and solve the problem. I just need to get a few things out. I need to hear myself say it, basically. Oh, someone says I've gone quiet. Oh, venting, Chantel says. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Ranting, yeah. The last thing I want to do is just to remind people of the support available. I know I've taken you right up to midday, so if you have to leave, please do drop off. Those of you on the recording, I'm just going to finish this and then we'll have some open Q&A for those that are still here. So don't forget about our online EAP services. If you're a subscriber of CiC, you can visit well-online.co.uk. Get in touch with us anytime you like at assist@cicwellbeing.com. And just a few more ideas. I'm going to put the link to the YouTube channel back in the chat there. You can sign up for our newsletter at cicwellbeing.com. Subscribe to that YouTube channel. Even if you miss these live sessions, you'll then get a reminder once a month that a new one's been uploaded. If you're a CiC customer, please do contact your account or relationship manager to discuss more of these group sessions. We can come and start this conversation in your workplace as well. And for those new to CiC, go and have a look at cicwellbeing.com and fill out our inquiry form. We'd love to tell you more. So for those of you watching on YouTube, thank you for joining us. Hopefully you've enjoyed this session. I know it's a bit of a longer one. Hopefully it kept your interest. Let us know in the comments how it's going. And for those of you sticking